Penguin Random House Audio presents The Big East, Inside the Most Entertaining and Influential Conference in College Basketball History by Dana O'Neill. This is the author, Dana O'Neill. To George, for 2+ decades of love, kindness, and above all else, patience. Author's note. On a chilly January morning, I walked into Carnesecca Arena and headed to a small room generally used for academic advising. I spent the next several hours in the Spartan space, decorated with just a table and 4 chairs, as the man for whom the building is named and his boss took me on the journey of their careers, from the humble beginnings to the legendary finishes. That day spent with former St. John's coach Lou Carnesecca and athletic director Jack Kaiser, 95 and 93 years young respectively, began what can only be described as nearly a year's worth of enlightening, entertaining, and oftentimes hilarious research for this book. When I started covering Big East games some 30 years ago, I never imagined I'd write a book on the league's storied history. Yet in some ways, my career led me here. All of those seasons of reporting helped me establish the contacts, the relationships, and the luck necessary for this endeavor. I interviewed more than 60 people for this book, from the bit players to the superstars. Unless otherwise noted, all of the interviews included were conducted by me with this book in mind. In some cases, I asked people to retell stories they'd shared with me earlier, but most of it was new, with the goal of telling the story of the Big East. I am grateful to everyone who shared their stories and indebted to the basketball gods who graced me with the good fortune of a few more phone calls with John Thompson Jr. before he passed. Introduction. The birth of the brawling Big East. It was Camelot with bad language. His head aching, a dazed Mike Tranghese walked out of the locker room and shuffled back toward his courtside seat at Madison Square Garden, knowing his boss would be calling soon. It was March 1984, the year before the NCAA tournament expanded to a 64-team field, and as chair of the tourney selection committee, Dave Gavitt was holed up in Kansas City. In a day's time, the committee members would reveal the bracket. Those duties meant Gavitt, the Big East commissioner, couldn't attend his own tournament final. But he was watching intently and phoned regularly to check in with Tranghese, his right-hand man. After watching Syracuse and Georgetown nearly come to blows on the court, Tranghese knew Gavitt would be looking for a full report. Just 5 years old, the Big East already owned a reputation as a physical and occasionally brutish conference. Fights and in-game extracurriculars were commonplace, with game officials often forced to restore order after tempers flared. It didn't matter if one team was 10-0 and the other 0-10. This was Northeast basketball turf war, and everyone got into it. Fueled by their hot-headed coaches and burnished by their early dominance in the Big East, Syracuse and Georgetown held a special dislike for each other. Their rivalry was primal, a mutual hostility that established the league's image more than any other. The two met in the very first Big East tournament final, and between them owned 3 of the first 4 championships. By 1984, the enmity was near its apex when the two came together for the tournament championship in New York. Though Georgetown ranked number 2 in the nation and the Orange were unranked, Syracuse held a 3-point lead late in the game when the Orange's Andre Hawkins and Georgetown's Michael Graham fought for a rebound, their arms tangled around the ball. Hawkins gained the momentum, but as he fell backward, Graham appeared to swat at the big man with his left hand. Game official Dick Paparo charged into the melee, hooking his thumb over his shoulder, seemingly tossing Graham from the game for the would-be sucker punch. But after conferring with his other game officials, Paparo called off the hook. Graham remained in the game. Already furious and fuming at the reversal, Syracuse coach Jim Boeheim neared blinding rage as Georgetown not only rallied to force overtime, but won the championship in the extra stanza. Hoping to calm Boeheim afterwards, Tranghese made his way to the Syracuse locker room. But there was no placating the Orange coach. He was fuming mad, convinced his team had been robbed of its rightful title. Gesticulating wildly as he retold his side of the story, Boeheim then headbutted his assistant commissioner. Stunned, Tranghese turned and left the room, his forehead bleeding slightly from the conk on the head. So Dave calls and says, "How's it going?" Tranghese recalls. I screamed, "How's it going, Dave? Jimmy Boeheim just headbutted me. That's how it's going." Dave just laughed. It was crazy, but it's also what made the whole thing so great. I mean, some of this stuff, you can't make it up. No, you certainly couldn't make up much of what happened in the Big East Conference. It is almost too preposterous to believe. Years later, mention of the conference conjures up a well of sentiment, a heavy dose of yarn spinning, and more than a little all at what everyone got away with. This was a conference perfectly named. Everything about the Big East was big. Its teams, its players, its games, its coaches, and, it turns out, its staying power. Because it's more than basic nostalgia that fuels Big East memories. It is genuine fondness and appreciation for a basketball league that transcended even fan allegiance. Grads always hold their alma maters close to their hearts, able to recount the minute details of glorious plays past. The Big East somehow spans school allegiances. Shoot, I'm 57 years old, and I'll be walking down the streets of Manhattan, and people will stop me to talk about certain games, says St. John's great Chris Mullen. It's unbelievable. It really was unbelievable. The players too good, the moments too magical, the personalities too oversized, and the tales too crazy to possibly be real. And yet it all happened. The ridiculous and the sublime, the sweet shots and the flailing fists, the hijinks and the histrionics. Built from the vision of one man, Dave Gavitt, the Big East grew into a national power, partnering with an equally spunky sports network, ESPN, to become the most formidable and influential conference in college athletics history. The symbiotic TV partnership introduced national branding to a sport that previously had contented itself with mastering the local markets, and with ESPN as megaphone, the Big East introduced a whole different attitude to college basketball. From its physicality to its playground style, its fashion to its fuming coaches, the league knocked the civility of college hoops on its ear, bringing instead a whole new appeal with its urban street cred that still lives today. Today's posterizing dunks and posturing after made threes, it all stems from the snarl and style of the Big East. And thanks largely to the Big East's parity, which strengthened rather than weakened its appeal, a sport once comfortably housed on the cushy campuses of its blue bloods exploded into the game for every man. It should have been called the Gavitt League, Boeheim says. None of it happens without him. But Gavitt's dream and vision would only take him so far. It was the people, the on-court talent that played second fiddle only to the off-court personalities, that lifted it to another stratosphere. What's that old song? The late Georgetown coach John Thompson Jr. says, reciting from memory the lyrics to Doin' What Comes Naturally from Annie Get Your Gun. Folks are dumb where I come from. They ain't had any learning. Still they've gone from A to Z, doing what comes naturally. We were naturally good theater. We didn't have to fake it. From its inception, what happened behind the scenes was nearly as incredible as what happened in the games. Between arguments over boardroom tables and near fistfights in hallways, the coaches fumed and fussed to try to get an edge in a league blessed with the good fortune to come of age with a collection of eventual Hall of Famers. A lot of the personalities were, what's the right word? Experimental? Says former Big East referee Tim Higgins. They were, junior personalities when the whole thing started. In a short time, they'd grow into legends, fueled by competitiveness and combustion, and craft a league that changed the face of college basketball. The Big East redirected the epicenter of basketball, shifting the power base firmly to the Northeast. Before the Big East came into existence, the East Coast suffered a 30-year drought without a national champion. Since the league's inception in 1979, 9 national champions have come from the Big East. 5 of its coaches are members of the Naismith Memorial Hall of Fame, and 7 of its players are enshrined as well. But what makes the league truly special can't be summarized in a statistic. It's the reverence in which it's held by anyone associated with college basketball. NCAA honchos, coaches who lost to Big East foes, and others who watch the league from afar all practically gush when they discuss it. They marvel at the talent and the competition, of course, but also about how the Big East led college basketball away from a neighborhood parochial sport and into a national event. Maybe college basketball eventually would have grown into the popular sport it is today without the Big East, but there's no denying that the league shoved it into the mainstream. There is also, among insiders and outsiders, a real awe and appreciation for the collegiality that fueled the Big East's success. The greater good was not necessarily a concern to leagues already long established. They could succeed with the bulk of their teams riding the coattails of the few. In the Big East, beneath the cussin' in the name.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?